A lot of people move to Atlanta thinking the hard part is finding the house. Then they get here and realize the commute, taxes, weather, and budget trade-offs can change the whole search. In this video, I'm breaking down why you may want to avoid living in Atlanta unless you can handle these 7 things. I've been in this market for over 28 years, and there are surprises that catch buyers after they've already moved. The first thing people will tell you about Atlanta is how bad the traffic is around here. And they are not wrong. You'll leave the house for what should be a normal drive and end up spending twice as much time in the car as you expected. The reason is that Atlanta covers a massive area, but the jobs tend to cluster in a handful of places. Midtown, Buckhead, Perimeter Center, Cumberland, these are some of the big employment hubs where a lot of people are trying to get to at the same time. So the traffic isn't spread evenly across the metro area. It gets concentrated on the same major routes every morning and every afternoon. The downtown connector is probably the best example. That's where I-75 and I-85 come together through the middle of the city. It can be as wide as about 14 lanes in spots, and it still backs up just about every day. Then you've got Georgia 400 heading toward Alpharetta. By around 7 in the morning, traffic is already building on that stretch on a typical weekday. There's an express lane project planned along Georgia 400 with major construction expected to start in 2026, and the new lanes anticipated to open around 2031. So before you fall in love with a house, check the commute, because where you live compared to where you work isn't a small detail in Atlanta. It's part of your day every single day. But buyers also need to pay close attention to the taxes here, because it can change a lot depending on where you are. Now, if you're relocating to Atlanta and trying to figure out which neighborhoods make sense for your commute, your budget, and the way you want to live day to day, I work with buyers and sellers in town Atlanta every day and can tell you what's available and what works best for you. My contact info is in the description below. All right, let's move on. Buyers are looking at the purchase price, the mortgage payment, maybe the HOA. Then they start comparing homes that are listed at about the same price and realize the yearly cost can be very different. Metro Atlanta isn't one city operating under one tax rate. You're buying in a county. Maybe it's Fulton, maybe it's DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, Cherokee, Clayton, or somewhere else. Every county has its own tax structure, and one of the biggest reasons those numbers vary comes back to schools. In Georgia, local property taxes help fund schools. So when people are targeting highly rated school districts, part of what they're paying for every year is that school system. That's why 2 homes with the same list price don't always cost the same amount to own. Georgia taxes property based on 40% of the home's assessed value, and then local tax rates get applied from there. In the city of Atlanta, whether you're in Fulton or DeKalb County, the total millage you pay is a combination of city, county, and school rates that generally adds up to around the low 40s in mills once everything is stacked together. Cobb County tends to run lower overall than many in-town areas, and Cherokee has historically been on the lower side for effective property tax burden compared with some closer-in metro counties. Besides, property values have been rising, which means assessed values have been rising as well. In some newer communities, especially in parts of North Fulton and Cherokee, you may also have HOA fees or community development fees on top of property taxes. Before you get attached to a monthly payment, check the county and the school district and run the tax estimate for that specific property. 2 homes with the same price tag can end up costing thousands of dollars apart each year, and that's a number you'll keep paying long after closing. And there's another expense people underestimate when they move to Atlanta. Everybody knows it's coming since it shows up every summer, but many people don't prepare for that. By the time June gets here, you walk outside in the morning and it's already warm. But when July and August show up, the humidity gets pretty frustrating. People moving from places with a drier climate are often surprised by how much it changes day-to-day life. You spend more time in air conditioning, plan outdoors activities differently, and you pay a lot more attention to how well your house stays cool. And that's where the cost comes in. During the summer months, running the air conditioning isn't optional. Between June and September, power bills tend to be way higher than the rest of the year. If the house has an older HVAC system or poor insulation, that difference can get pretty expensive. That's especially important in Atlanta because there are so many older homes all over the city. A lot of people love those historic neighborhoods: Virginia Highland, Inman Park, Candler Park. They have character, huge trees, and homes you won't find in newer suburbs. But many of those homes were built long before anyone was thinking about modern cooling systems. So if you're looking at an older home, ask when the HVAC was replaced. Ask about insulation. Ask how old the windows are. Those answers can save you money every summer you owned that house. And while the weather changes a lot during the year, so does the housing market. In a bit, I'll show you why the timing that works in one neighborhood doesn't always work in another. Now, when fall shows up, everything is different. September, October, and November are some of the best months of the year in Atlanta. The humidity drops, temperatures become much more comfortable, and people spend more time outside. It's one of the reasons people love living here. And if you're moving to Atlanta, there's one project that shapes where people live, where they spend time, and where home values have been rising. One thing people underestimate when they move to Atlanta is how quickly some areas can change. The version of Atlanta you see while you're house hunting may not be the same version you're living in a year later. A restaurant opens, a new apartment building opens up, a stretch of older warehouses gets redeveloped, a neighborhood that wasn't getting much attention suddenly ends up on everyone's radar. Atlanta has been growing for a long time, and that growth doesn't happen evenly across the metro area. A big reason for that is the Atlanta Beltline. It's a loop of trails and parks that connects neighborhoods around the city. And wherever those completed sections go, investment tends to follow. Old Fourth Ward, Inman Park, the area around Ponce City Market, Reynoldstown. Those neighborhoods have changed significantly over the last several years, and the impact spreads beyond the trail itself. West Midtown is a good example. Not that long ago, it was known more for warehouses and industrial buildings. Today, it's one of the most popular areas in the city for restaurants, apartments, offices, and new development. Smyrna has attracted many buyers too, especially those who want to stay close to the city without paying some of the higher in-town prices. Alpharetta keeps drawing new companies and new residents, and parts of South Fulton are starting to see more activity as well. Downtown is another area where many things have happened in the last few years. You've got more housing, more businesses, more places for people to spend time. But builders have started slowing down because there's already a good amount of inventory available, especially townhomes. And not every buyer wants a townhome. So if you're looking at new construction, you may have more room to negotiate than buyers had a year ago. And that's something you need to know about Atlanta. The market here works differently than many other places. Buyers come into Atlanta trying to figure out the perfect time to buy, but Atlanta doesn't move on one schedule, and that's the challenge around here. You can read that inventory is up, homes are taking longer to sell, and buyers have more negotiating room than they did a few years ago. All of that can be true. Then you start looking in a specific neighborhood and realize that the experience doesn't match the headline at all. That's because different parts of the market follow different patterns. Over the last few years, Atlanta went through the same cycle most markets did. Rates were low, prices moved up fast, then rates climbed, and more buyers became more selective. Today, there's more room to negotiate than there was during the peak years. Homes are spending more time on the market, and sellers are having to pay closer attention to pricing. But that doesn't mean every neighborhood is moving at the same pace. Take areas tied to strong school districts. Parts of Cobb County, North Fulton, Decatur, Families are often planning moves around the school calendar, so activity tends to pick up in the spring and slow down later in the year. In those areas, buying outside that spring rush can sometimes work in your favor. There's one trade-off that catches a lot of relocation buyers. In a few minutes, I'll show you why some people end up changing their mind about the type of home they want. Now, there are neighborhoods where the location itself is the driving decision. Areas near the Beltline are a great example. People aren't waiting for a particular season. They're looking for that neighborhood, and when the right home comes up, they're ready to move. That's why timing can work differently depending on where you're looking. Someone shopping in Decatur may have a very different experience than someone looking near the Beltline, even if they're buying at the same time. So before trying to time the market, figure out which market you're shopping in, because the calendar isn't always the thing driving demand. And giving yourself enough time to make a good decision tends to work better than trying to catch the perfect moment. Sometimes that also means being open to a type of home you weren't considering at first. And that's another thing on this list. If you're about to buy a house, you usually start your search with a detached home in mind. You want the yard, the privacy, no shared walls, and that's what you're focused on when you first start looking. Then you start narrowing down where you want to be. Maybe you want to stay close to work. Maybe you want a shorter commute, a certain school district, or you want to be able to walk to restaurants and coffee shops. But most of the time, you may have to change your mind, because in some of Atlanta's most desirable areas, the home that fits the location and the budget is often attached. A townhome, a condo, sometimes a duplex, and that's not unusual here. Attached homes make up a much bigger part of the in-town market than many buyers expect before they start looking at listings. In places like West Midtown, Reynoldstown, Blandtown, and parts of Decatur, townhomes have become one of the main ways people get into those neighborhoods. A newer townhome in a well-located in-town area often starts somewhere in the mid-400s and goes up from there. In some neighborhoods, you're looking at the 500s and 600s pretty quickly. Condos can be the lower entry point. In Midtown, for example, older units can still be found in the mid-200s to the mid-300s. You do have to pay attention to HOA fees because those become part of your monthly cost. Depending on the building, that could be a few $100s a month or well over $1,000 in buildings with pools, gyms, concierge service, and other amenities. I've noticed that some buyers change their opinion once they start touring attached homes. They go in thinking they would never consider one. Then they realize the location works, the layout works, and they're getting access to a neighborhood that would cost much more with a detached home. Besides, attached homes tend to move a little slower than detached homes, so buyers often have more time to compare options and negotiate. Detached homes are still available, of course. If having a yard and a standalone home is high on your list, you can absolutely find that. But many buyers end up looking further out into places like Gwinnett, Cherokee, or parts of Cobb to make the numbers work. The challenge comes when someone wants all three at the same time: a detached home, an in-town location, and a fixed budget. That's usually where the market starts forcing some decisions. And figuring out those priorities early can save you months of searching. But there's one more reality you need to be prepared for. You'll need a car here, no doubt. I know many people come here thinking they won't need to drive that much, but going to work is one trip. Going to the grocery store is another one, and if you want to go for dinner or take your kids to do some activities somewhere else, you'll definitely need a car. You might spend more time in the car than you expected. That's just how Atlanta works. The city grew around cars, and most of the metro still depends on them. Now, MARTA does help in certain areas. If you're living near a station in Midtown, Buckhead, Decatur, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, or Chamblee, and your job is close to a station too, you can use it regularly. The airport connection is one of the best examples. Getting from the airport into the city without dealing with traffic is a huge advantage, but the coverage is still not that good. Once you get outside those transit corridors, MARTA starts reaching fewer of the places people go every day. Gwinnett has around 1 million residents. Cobb has about 750,000. Neither county has MARTA rail service today, and that changes what daily life looks like for a lot of people living there. So when someone tells me they really want to rely heavily on transit, the first thing I'm looking at is where they're planning to live. That decision can narrow the search pretty quickly. There are neighborhoods where MARTA can be a big part of your routine. There are also neighborhoods where your car is going to be part of almost every plan you make. So when you're putting together a budget for Atlanta, include the car, include insurance, include maintenance, include everything that comes with owning one. You can still build a lifestyle here with less driving, for sure, but only in certain in-town neighborhoods. For most people, though, having a car is part of living in Atlanta. This is a great place to live. But some of the things that surprise people don't show up until after they've moved. Knowing these 7 things ahead of time can save you a lot of frustration later. If you're planning a move to Atlanta this year and you want to talk through your budget, timeline, and neighborhood options, send me an email at hello@vcgrealty.com. We can look at your specific situation and narrow down where it makes the most sense to focus your search. And if you're trying to figure out where to focus your search, I've linked a video right here on 6 Atlanta neighborhoods I'd be looking at in 2026 and why they're getting so much attention. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.